Welcome to Fertility Village. This is your weekly live talk show where community and support come together. With rotating hosts, expert guests, and meaningful conversations, we're here to guide you through the highs and the lows of infertility. Whether you're searching for answers, seeking advice, or just looking for a special place to belong, Fertility Village is your space to connect, learn, and grow. Because it really does take a village, and we are here for you every step of the way. Thanks for joining.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Fertility Village Live. I'm Kaylee.
And I'm Sarah, and we are continuing with our theme for Adoption and Permanency Awareness Month, a topic very near and dear to my heart as a proud adoptive mom. We are joined today by Bethany Vidican from she's the clinical coordinator, from Beginnings Family Services. We have Karen Rybko with the Adoption Council of Ontario and Lisa Bennett, a peer connector and support for adoptive, kinship, and customary care families with Interwoven Connections. Thank you, ladies, so much for being here.
So happy to have you.
We have lots.
We're going to dive right in with our first question. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves and your roles within your respective agencies? And because you're in order on my screen this way, how about Bethany, you start us off?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me here tonight. It's a pleasure and a privilege, especially being in that it is International Adoption Awareness Month. A little bit about myself. As Sarah said, I am the clinical coordinator at Beginnings Family Services, a private adoption agency in Southwestern Ontario. Really special for me to have this role as I am an adoptee. I'm also an adoptive parent. My kids are hopefully falling asleep upstairs. They are 6 and 8. My daughter, we adopted through the private system, met her when she was about 10 hours old. And then my son came home when he was almost 3. And obviously as an adoptee, my work has kind of bled into my life and vice versa. Really incredible to be doing the work that I do at Beginnings as a clinical coordinator. Essentially, I wear many hats, as many often do at a small agency. So I manage our foster program. I also do some birth parent counseling. I do a lot of clinical work behind the scenes, so developing programs for birth parents, post-adoption, also check-ins for our families after they bring babies home, social media, and a bunch of other things. So thank you so much for having me tonight.
Thanks for being here. And what about you, Lisa?
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for having me. Greatly appreciate it. I'm Lisa Bennett, and as Sarah said, I am a peer connector with Interwoven Connections. A little bit about myself. I'm an adoptive mom of a now 10-year-old son who joined my family through public adoption when he was roughly 18 months old. I'm from North Bay, Ontario, and I work as like I said, a peer connector with Interwoven Connections. So our organization helps support adoptive, kinship, and customary care families throughout their permanency journey. So I'm a Northern peer connector, so a lot of my families come to me through the Northern region, but we are a provincial organization, so we have peer connectors located all over Ontario. As well, a little bit about what we do. So we offer supports and advocacy for our families. So different things like offering them resources and webinars, being there as a one-on-one for them to help walk alongside them through their permanency journey. We advocate for them so we can do kind of school meetings if they're needing us to, writing letters of support, seeking out different professionals within their region and where they're located, and just being there alongside them as they continue their journey permanency. And our services can be lifelong. So we're there for parents and caregivers as long as they need us. And we're there as much or as little as they need us for whatever resources and supports they're looking for.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Thanks for being here. And what about you, Karen? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role?
Sure. So I'm Karen Rybko, and I currently work for the Adoption Council of Ontario, and I'm in the centralized adoption intake department. And the Adoption Council of Ontario is an agency that has a number of supports and services to support adoptive families from the beginning of the journey right through until the adoption is finalized and after. And we have a whole website of resources and webinars and seminars, and we can connect adoptive families with other adoptive families, and we can connect adoptive families with therapists. So we really are a very resource-based agency. And in my role, I provide education and information to the public about adoption, where to start, how to start, and point people in the right direction.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Karen. So I'm going to work back the other way with our next question. Bethany kind of touched on it a little bit, but what led you to your work in the field of adoption and permanency and post-adoption support? So what brought you to the ACO, Karen?
Actually, I have a very interesting story, because I started my role in adoption way back when in South Africa. As you can hear, I have an accent. And I worked in a place called the Princess Alice Adoption Home, where birth moms used to go and stay during the pregnancy. And then they used to stay there for the duration till they had the baby. And then afterwards, they could make a decision about whether they wanted to place the baby for adoption. So that was where I began my career in adoption. And then when I came to Canada, I started working for a local children's aid society, where I worked for 31 years. And have worked in the adoption department as an adoption worker there throughout my whole career. And I just recently retired. So I've seen adoption change over the years in a lot of different ways, from, placing many, many infants for adoption to placing older children and even teenagers for adoption. And it's been amazing to sort of watch the changes that have occurred along the way, and to learn so much. And anyway, I recently retired from Children's Aid, and here I am at the ACO now, providing education and information to families.
And who better than someone with all that experience? That's amazing, Karen. Thank you. How about you, Lisa? What brought you to Interwoven Connections?
I registered actually as a parent with Interwoven Connections, and I thought the organization was wonderful. It allowed me to connect with other families within the community, and just to feel supported. Being an adoptive mom, I thought, I love so much. I have such a passion for it, and I love to support others on their permanency journey as well. And it's a way to keep connected with others. You don't feel so isolated, and you know that, no matter where someone is on their journey, you can relate in some of what their story is, and just being there as a listening ear, and really wanting to advocate for families as they navigate their journey through adoption and kinship and customary care.
I love that. I also registered with Interwoven Connections because when I adopted through Beginnings, they gave us a nice little package and said, here, join these supports. And I thought, I can't wait. So that brings us back to Bethany. You talked a little bit about being an adoptee and adoptive mom. Was there anything else that really led you to work with Beginnings Family Services?
Yeah, I guess I was working at Family and Children's Services for a number of years in the domestic violence program, and a job came up in the adoption department. I'm like, oh, well, this seems relatable. It seems like everything I do, we use my professional and my personal life. So I had an opportunity for 5 years to start doing home studies and facilitate pride training. And it was so interesting. During that time, I actually went on my own journey of finding my birth family. I got married. I experienced infertility. I adopted, all while walking other families through a very like-minded journey. So it was an exceptional journey of growth for myself. And then I went on parental leave after we had adopted my daughter. And I had a lovely coffee with my now boss, Amanda, when she told me about this wonderful place called Beginnings. And I was mid-parental leave and wasn't sure what my next steps were going to be. That was 2018. So I started here when my daughter was 9 months old. And it's been an incredible journey to be a part of. And I once had a birth parent counselor hand my daughter to me and give her to me in my arms. And now I've had the privilege of doing that so many times, even in your story, Sarah.
Yes, she was there.
It's exceptionally beautiful, the role that I have, and I do not take it a minute for granted. And I'm so, I feel really privileged to be able to do what I get to do.
Love it. Love it so much.
That's really cool. I didn't know that about you and Sarah also.
Hope that was okay if I did a little tiny.
Of course. Oh, I'm an open book. Yep, absolutely. Yep. Bethany was there when we got to meet our son. She was the birth parent worker for us. And she recorded the whole thing and all the tears and all the happiness. And she's been a great support. So yeah, it's kind of full circle. And I'm so glad she could join us tonight because personal connections. And because of her, I'm also involved with Interwoven connections. So it's funny how life dictates kind of our paths sometimes. And I can appreciate it. And again, not take a single moment for granted. I love every second. So
that's awesome. Okay, switching gears a little bit, and I'm going to put this one out to the whole group. Can one of you or all of you speak to some misconceptions that families have before they start the process of adoption?
I can give an answer. One misconception that I can think of is some families think that if they adopt a child in infancy or very young toddler age, that they won't kind of remember the process and have a traumatic background or that loss. But it's very prominent that there is that loss and trauma for all children. I've had that experience with my own son. So not thinking that he would remember some of the things, and it's amazing the things that they retain, even if they don't quite understand. There's that sense of something belonging, where do I come from? These questions that come out later on. But there is also that trauma piece because of their history and not knowing everything or questioning, where they come from, what their story was before they were placed. So I find that is a big misconception that if you adopt a child younger, that they may not come to your family with those concerns, but they definitely will. And sometimes it takes years to come out, but eventually you may see some of those memories or questions that they may ask, or sometimes some of the behaviors that they may be exhibiting might make you wonder what kind of triggers they may have that we're still trying to figure out. So that's one thing that I've noticed throughout my adoption and in connecting with other families as well.
It's a really good one.
I'll share. I don't know.
Any for you, Bethany?
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily a misconception, but maybe something that's underestimated. I was just talking a minute ago about just my own journey growing, right, as I was doing home studies. And I really think that for prospective adoptive parents, I think they might underestimate how much they're going to learn about themselves during the process and how much they'll be confronted with, particularly about their own losses and how those will come up in their adoption journey. And I think that's why it's so important to be engaged and open in the assessment process so that you truly can prepare yourself for the highs and lows of this journey and looking at what are some of the things that you think might trigger you in the future. What are some experiences that you might have down the road that are going to be hard for you? What will it be like if, you're struggling with attachment? How is that going to kind of bleed into what you've experienced in your own life? So really just the things that people learn about themselves in the journey. So maybe more underestimated than a misconception. And then I think the other one as a birth parent counselor is a misconception would be misconceptions about birth and expectant parents. I've worked with a number of them, and these are truly incredible people who, when we take a minute to get to know their stories, underneath it all, there's beautiful people who genuinely love their children, who haven't had the support systems like you or I might have had in our lives, who are very isolated, and it's showing in their lifestyle and their patterns of behavior, etc. So really just to kind of get underneath all of what we see and what we read about, And I think that helps to create better relationships, particularly with openness, when there's an understanding of really and truly who these birth parents are. I've never met a birth parent that I haven't liked or haven't learned something from. And it's incredible. We get a referral and you read something on the page and there's a big long story, right? And then you meet this person and it's like, you're the person I've read about. And you're just like I am, right? In this world, and you just had different experiences and different struggles. So that's probably what I would say is just kind of ideas and thoughts about birth parents.
I love that. That's awesome.
I just actually want to follow up on that because one of the misconceptions that I was thinking about is that oftentimes adoptive parents might think, well, now that we have this child in our family, they're going to be part of our family and they're going to forget about their birth family and they're never going to see them again. And so just to follow up on what Bethany was saying is that nowadays, openness is encouraged. And openness meaning that there is some sort of ongoing relationship between the birth family and the adoptive family so that the birth family can know about, how the child is doing, how they're growing, how they're progressing. The child can know who their birth parents are, and they're not going to have these 5 million questions about who am I, have the identity issues as they grow, because they're going to be able to have that ongoing contact. So I think, a birth family, or like when you get married, let me put it this way. When you get married, you are clearly taking on your spouse's family, whether it's your wife's family or your husband's family. And the same thing when you're adopting a child, you're kind of adopting their family as well. That birth family is forever going to be in their lives, whether you see them, whether you don't see them, they're always going to be there. And so working on that openness piece is really, really so important nowadays, so that both families and with peace of mind.
I love that you guys touched on that. It's not as scary. I know that is a great misconception to come up because people are a little bit, I think, afraid of what openness looks like. And it's such a spectrum. But again, from experience, it's not a scary thing. And you get into your groove and it's just more extended family and more people that just love your child, love that child so much. So thank you guys for sharing those excellent misconceptions. So how would you prepare prospective parents for the realities of adoption? So you've talked a little bit about openness, and I think that big misconception really goes into that preparedness of prospective parents. Is there anything else you guys can think of that can help prepare prospective parents?
I mean, I'll go first just because I'm on the screen, but I think that's such a really, really good question because it's like any new experience that you're going into. You just don't know what it's going to be like until you're in it. And that's why it's so important to prepare yourself as much as you can beforehand. Do the research. There's so much information about adoption. Adoption is like a whole world on its own. I mean, there's books and there's podcasts and there's webinars and there's there's so much information and so many issues to learn about, like, how am I going to be raising this adopted child? What are the issues in adoption? There's an amazing book called The 7 Core Issues in Adoption, which came out quite long ago, but which has sort of become the focus in adoption in the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years. And there's amazing things in that book which adoptive families can learn about. There are, like I said, our agency has webinars on how to adopt and how to prepare oneself for adoption. There's webinars on openness and every facet of adoption, really. There's so much to learn. So I think if people are wanting to know more, there's, just a world out there. And if you don't like reading a book, there's so many other avenues that you can learn and prepare yourself.
Shameless plug for the ACO. Interwoven has a prospective parent support group. Oasis is always supporting prospective parents. So shameless plug for all the organizations that can support prospective parents going into that journey. Love that, Karen.
We'll have to add some resources to the show notes. Sounds like there's a wealth of information to share.
Absolutely. When we post, we will post all the resources that we talk about tonight too.
I think I can add to that. I think it's so important, the education piece. And even when I'm doing home studies, I'll kind of, when I'm assessing the family, look at maybe some areas that they need to grow in and kind of guide them in the direction, but put the ball in their court, right? For them to do that growing and learning. But I think beyond reading and learning about adoption, I think that people truly need to learn about themselves. I really do think that that's underestimated, and this is an opportunity while you're waiting to see how you can learn and grow. If you're in a couple relationship, to learn and grow as a couple. What are some of your expectations? What are things that are realistic or not realistic? What are some things that we need to work through while we're waiting, instead of just kind of sitting stagnant waiting, right? Like, how can you grow and be better prepared in those moments? So I usually put the ball back in a prospective adoptive family court. What do you want to learn and grow? How do you want to gain in your knowledge? How do you want to grow in your understanding of one another? And I say that even more strongly now in my own experience as an adoptive parent, having been in it for the last almost 9 years. I learned so much about myself every day. And I think that there are things that I could have learned more about myself before I was thrown into this, because it's going to happen naturally, in ways where I could have, strengthened certain things about myself, right? Or addressed things in my past that have more of an impact now than I would like them to. So I really think it's actually a time of self-discovery, as much as you're learning about adoption, learning about yourself so that you can be the best parent when your time comes.
I love that.
You spoke a little to sitting and waiting and that being challenging. My guess is that's one of the bigger challenges of families who are sort of in the matching and placement process. Can you speak to that kind of, like, what are the challenges that you see people really face?
Yeah, I mean, you've been in it, Sarah. I've been in it.
Yeah.
It's honestly indescribable. I literally just have chills thinking about it, because you just want this so bad. And it is something that you have absolutely zero control over, and how desperate that you can feel in those moments. And I won't speak for every prospective adoptive mom, but I remember, like, every time my email would ping, right? Or I remember one time our adoption agency they wanted to call me to check in. That was the worst idea you ever had, because I think you're calling me telling me I'm about to be a baby. I'm not about to be a mom, right? I'm not saying families shouldn't check in. I'm just saying that it's so challenging, and you don't really prepare yourself, I don't think, or I don't know how you do, for how difficult that is. So as an agency, like, from beginnings, we really do our best to, we invite families now with a Q&A. So one of the first opportunities they have to meet with us is meet with other prospective parents on a Zoom meeting, just answering some questions, talking to them about what the process is going to look like, being on the Zoom screen, seeing if there's other people in a similar situation that they are in. We do send letters where we are just kind of doing a check-in, acknowledging their weights. We also, even in our social media, I think actually a post went up today just about acknowledging everybody's weight, because it can be such a lonely experience. And everyone else, and I think you're acutely aware of it as a prospective adoptive parent, like, the world is passing everybody by, right? And every minute and every day can feel kind of like an eternity for you. So really just acknowledging that for our families, encouraging them to reach out. We're so thankful for the groups that are out there right now, right, for waiting families, because I think those lifelines are so important. The unfortunate thing is there's not a whole lot that our agency can really do, right, during that time. One piece of advice that I give for people is to really try and live their lives as best as they can, right? Not miss out on opportunities, not miss out on experiences, because I'm quite certain that for most of these people, their day is going to come. So just to the best to live their lives in the fullest while they're waiting. And I get to have the beauty of watching the journey unfold for a lot of families. And I remember seeing them at the very beginning, right? And then having that experience of watching them become parents. And for most people, it happens in one way or another. So just living your lives in the meantime. I wish I had like some perfect recipe for how people get through it. And I think it impacts every family and every couple in different ways.
Well, I love that you said that, to live your life, because as we were waiting for, we knew we were being considered for a match, my husband and I, and we're like, well, we didn't know how long how long sometimes the wait can be for a match and these decisions to be made, because they're difficult ones. And we had planned a vacation and we had booked it last minute. And we didn't get the insurance because I'm like, this is taking forever, you know? So anyway, the day before we left, we had a consideration and they said, no, go. Like, just go live your life, go on vacation, enjoy it. You just don't know what's going to happen. So either way, we thought, okay, well, this is great. We'll wait. And it happened. We went on vacation and got matched. So we went on vacation as two people, and we came back as parents. So I love that you said, like, live your life and enjoy it, because that made that trip all that much more special. So enjoying it. So. Yeah,
I forgot about that, Sarah. I was just, as you were saying, I can think of 6 families off the top of my head where they've been called well around the world.
Yes.
Coming home, and you're meeting your baby when coming home. So yes, like, live your life to the best of your ability in those moments.
Yeah, because they'll just be made that much more special with those matches. And if they don't, you got to enjoy a vacation or be where you were around the world. So that's excellent. I'm going to move into challenges that arise after an adoption or placement is finalized. So what do you think? I know Interwoven sees a lot of that after placement. Lisa, what do you see?
Yeah, I can speak to that for sure. So there is so much going on when you adopt, like was mentioned before, you know. In my case, we had like support from our agency, and we had a task list of things that we had to complete before the child, you know, to make sure our house was safe and that we were appropriate to bring a child in our home. And then same kind of thing. We were waiting, and then all of a sudden, we got the call, and within 2 weeks, our little guy was with us. So it was like getting like his room prepared, because we didn't know the age, we didn't know the gender, we didn't know anything about that until the time came. So, there was a lot of support beforehand, and then once we were living the journey, you know, first-time parents, a newly toddler to our home, so he's exploring everything. You know, he had some services that he was already seeing professionals. So we kept those professionals involved because we wanted the best for him. But again, there was a lot of challenge that came with that. So my husband actually went off on the first part of the parental leave with my son, and not having, you know, we have nieces and nephews, but it was very challenging. Like, my husband was exhausted by the end of the day, and it was just nonstop, right? You go from not having a child from the beginning, you're getting a toddler. Like I said, they're busy. And then later on, it was the aggression pieces that started happening. So Interwoven Connection experiences, a lot of our families experience what we call AFCA, so aggression towards family and caregivers in childhood and adolescence. And so this is where children exhibit behaviors that can be challenging. And the behaviors are not only physical, like we often think about that when we think of aggression, but these behaviors can be verbal, they can be destruction of property, they can be injuring animals, manipulation, so many things detailed. So it can be very isolating for families, because if you don't have a community of people that are experiencing similarities, it's shameful to talk about, right? You think, oh, like this this isn't typical. Like, I don't want to bring my child out in public because if a behavior happens, people are looking at me and I'm getting judged. And there's all these assumptions. So it's very important to have a village of people that understand that and know that it's completely normal. And I didn't even know there was an acronym for it before I joined Interwoven Connections. And I was so relieved when I heard about it, because I thought, wow, this is something I've been experiencing with my own son. And I didn't have family. I didn't have friends around me that were adoptive. So I was kind of in my own little bubble trying to figure out, you know, what is he trying to tell me? Because of course he had verbal delays as well. So trying to figure out, what is he telling me? And, you know, what does this mean? Like, what do I need to do to help best support him? So having people to talk to and different webinars and trainings to help understand, you know, trauma and loss, and different diagnoses that children may have. And a lot of the times the diagnoses look so much similar to behaviors that might be happening when a child is traumatized and being triggered by something. And it's something that's like a constant journey trying to figure out for our children, because as they grow older, we see different patterns. So my son, you know, we'll see a certain pattern of things and we think, okay, we're done with one pattern, and then a couple years later it'll restart again, or something new happens and we're trying to figure out, okay, where's this coming from? So just knowing, I would say, having people to talk to, asking questions about different professionals that you can reach out to. Something I did myself when I took the Pathways to Permanency is I agreed to start an adoption support group here in North Bay with one of the other parents that I met. So we actually been running a group for several years now, and it's just wonderful. I get so much out of it as they do. We meet once a month. Sometimes it's in person. Sometimes we go do things with the kids. And it's great when we're able to get our children involved too, because then they know they're not alone. There's other children out there that are adopted and they don't have to be singled out. So yeah, my biggest thing would be to try to find a village. And someone once told me, and I never thought of this before, but if you want a village, you need to become a villager. And I thought, what a great expression, because, you know, we're all tired sometimes and going out just seems so difficult sometimes. And I can relate, especially when your child is having an outburst, or, you know, you haven't slept through the night because your child's kept you up. But I'll tell you, some days when I'm so tired and I get to that adoption group, it's almost like a relief off my shoulders. Like, I'm here, I can talk to you, you understand me, and there's no judgment.
Yeah, that's great. Lisa just touched on the Pathways to Permanence. So again, another shameless plug for the ACO. Runs an amazing program called Pathways to Permanence. It's for publicly adoptive families, and they've just opened it up with Interwoven Connections to kinship families, which is really amazing program for families. Karen, do you want to talk a little bit about that and how that helps people after placement?
Sure. Actually, I'm one of the trainers for the Pathways program, so information about that, and it is for families who already have a placement, and it's really about, it's not a therapeutic group, it's an educational program. It runs for 8 weeks, and every week we focus on a different topic, and it's really about educating families about trauma and loss and grief and what it means for children who've experienced trauma and how this might play out in their behaviors. And we talk about how parents can support their families and how they can support each other, and what they can do to try and make life a little bit easier for themselves. And we learn about the brain and how the brain might be affected during, you know, the pregnancy, and how how sort of brains that wire together, fire together, and what that all means, and how adoptive parents can really react in different ways. And what we call that is really therapeutic parenting, because oftentimes these children need a different kind of parenting, not the regular kind of day-to-day parenting that we may know about. So it's a wonderful educational program, and families love it. But I think just what you touched on, Bethany and Lisa, is that, the connection between adoptive families, they are the ones who get you. They're the ones who understand what you're going through, and they can understand you like no one else can because they've been through it as well. So, from all of the families that I've worked with, they really, really find the connections and the support between the adoptive families really the most beneficial. And from those pathways groups, we've actually had a lot of support groups form from there. And at ACO, we can always connect people to support groups in their area. And I know that Interwoven has a lot of support groups running at your agency as well. So I think that parent-to-parent connection is really, really important. Yeah.
Absolutely. We're big supporters of support at Oasis Fertility Support Network and Fertility Village Live. We are all about finding your people. So I love that it's continued through that adoption lens. It's, again, very special and meaningful to me because I say it repeatedly. Without Oasis Support Network, I would not have found Beginnings. I would not have found the ACO. I would not have found the information I needed to become an adoptive parent. And then on that same lens, I would not have found Interwoven Connections, who I'm also affiliated with, and brings me a great passion to support people who are adoptive parents and adoptive families. And so, yeah, it's always full circle for me. And it always just warms my heart so much to when people say, find your village, because that's what we preach every day, I feel like, at Oasis. So thank you.
Absolutely. I just actually wanted to say that we also do have support groups for children and youth of different ages. So oftentimes they can be online and the kids might be able to just do an activity together. So it's not necessarily that they're discussing adoption as such, like every single occasion or every sort of time they meet, but they do fun things together and just have the opportunity to meet with other kids who are also adopted and know that there are other kids that are in the same position as themselves. And there is a youth group that sort of spiraled off from a lot of kids having this opportunity to be together in a group. And they've kind of grown up together and now support each other and just are there for each other in a way that, other friends may not be able to be.
That's so cool. Love that. With parenting, I know that there's a lot of overwhelm, and I imagine when you're an adoptive parent, there's a extra level of overwhelm that can happen. And maybe I think a lot of us normalize that overwhelm and say, I can just deal with this, I'll figure it out. But are there signs that you can point to that say, maybe this family needs a little extra support? And how does that family access that extra support?
We can talk on this one if you'd like. So a lot of the times we forget to take care of ourselves first when we're parents, right? It's all about our children, what they need, who they need to see, appointments we need to get to, how they're going to get to school. But we often forget about ourselves. And I see that often with a lot of the families that I know or I support. And when they forget to take care of themselves, it takes a toll because then it becomes more stressful in the family. It makes doing the things that give you joy more difficult. And that should never happen. And I'm talking on behalf of myself. I experienced that. I didn't even realize that I went through a depression when my son joined my family many years ago. I lost myself. I didn't know where I was going, what I was doing, just bouncing around all the time, going through the motions that I had to do for him. But I forgot to do the things that made me happy, like even taking 5 minutes to enjoy my tea, going for a walk, enjoying nature, the things that I like to do, because I was just going through the motions, getting the day done, and so exhausted by the end of the day that was it. it took a lot of years to realize that my own mental health was taking a toll. And it took a lot of work to get me back on the right track. So I often like to be there as a listening ear for my families if they're struggling with that. Getting the proper supports for themselves as well. And I know it can be challenging when your child has multiple appointments in 1 week and you're like, when do I even fit this in? And for me, if it's like, do you want me to give you a phone call and you can talk for 20 minutes if that's what you have, and we could talk it out. We'll see, even if it's something like, I've learned to breathe too, which a lot of people used to tell me this, and I used to just be like, yeah, I breathe all the time, but it's different. Sometimes I just need a few minutes, especially when my child's challenging, to just breathe and get myself grounded so I remember where I am and what I need to do to have better support our situation. So self-care is very important, an important piece. So when we see our families struggling with that, that's a cue that, they need that extra support. What that looks like can be advocacy for finding them professionals, looking for different funding for them, helping them with applications, checking in with them more recent. That could be getting them connected with support groups or what we call a buddy match, which we can offer with Interwoven Connections. So getting them matched with somebody that has similarities so they have somebody to talk to so they don't feel so isolated and secluded. But I would say definitely when you see caregivers burnt out, exhausted, just completely at their limit, not knowing where to go, that's generally a cue that they're needing that extra support, and to be able to be there for them and walk alongside them and validate them. Validating, if anything else, this is hard. This is very hard. I understand you, that, it's it's normal, and make it normal for families. Like, it's hard parenting, and parenting children with complex needs and children that come from trauma and loss. It's hard, and validating that they are doing the best they can, and we're here to support in any way possible.
Absolutely. Bethany, Beginnings does a lot of post-placement support and care. So is there anything that you see sometimes that kind of says okay, we need some extra support? Or what kind of resources do you find most effective for those families long-term?
Yeah, I think in the last few years, we've done a much better job at really highlighting the supports afterwards. There's so much anticipating the adoption, right? And we never want families to feel like, okay, you have a baby, go on your merry way, right? Because I think that's really when the hard journey starts. So we do post-placement check-ins that are in and around the 30-day mark. Families also have their adoption practitioner that does the check-ins with them during their probationary period. But as an agency, we also want to do a check-in, and I'm personally the one who does those. And they're really cool meetings because they're on Zoom, and normally families are pretty polished when I've met them, right? Before baby. Now they're 30 days in, they have the mom buns going, and they're trying to feed babies and do everything on the screen. Life looks a lot different. But those are a really great opportunity where I'm able to check in with the families, truly honest, let's talk about how you're doing. And I really find by that time we've developed a rapport with this family, right? That they're able to be a little bit more candid with us about how they're feeling. And we talk about, getting time for themselves. I usually ask, have we squeezed in a date night? That's usually quite a laugh because no one has at the 30-day mark. But we talk about how they're doing. And one thing that really has been kind of, I think there hasn't been enough attention to post-adoption depression, which was coined by June Bond back in the day. And I actually just created another resource for adoptive families. We have a package that goes home when families are bringing a baby home, but there's so much, and who's sitting there reading through all the paperwork while they're trying to get used to parenting.
But that's my type A personality.
Exactly. Moms like me, we don't do that. We're just struggling through it. So we actually just created a resource that we haven't started using it yet, but it's actually kind of a video, an educational video about post-adoption depression. And I personally think I experienced it as well as an adoptive mom. But how do you say to somebody, I have everything like I have ever wanted, and I'm having such a hard time? Who understands this, right? And this journey that you have, and it's different for you. You've used your financial resources, your time, your everything. You put everything into wanting this moment, and you're having a hard time. It just doesn't make sense, right? And not something our doctors ask us about, etc. We're not going in for a 6-week checkup postpartum, those types of things, right? So there's not a lot of natural opportunities to talk about the struggle. So we've tried to create those through beginning. So sometimes I will see people who are just really isolated and really kind of let down by their support system. And you guys talk a lot about this village, but some people don't have it, right? Or they think they have this village, and then the baby comes home and they don't, right? Or they have a village, but it's really not quite that right level of understanding, right? This journey is unique. Yeah, they've got some mom friends, but their journey is very different from their own. So it's generally pretty evident when families, I think, are struggling, even just their affect and everything. But obviously, we're not medical professionals. We can't assess that, but we can encourage them to check in with their doctor. If we know there's a history of mental health, ask about how things are going, if they've been able to see their doctor since babies come home, what it would look like if they asked, their mother-in-law to come over for a break, or for them to have an evening off, or those types of things. So sometimes just offering some ideas, or just having a discussion about it, and taking any stigma away, and letting them know that what they're experiencing is very normal. I do think a lot of our families are coming to us, our expectant parents, 3rd trimester after baby's been born. So we're not working with adoptive families who have had time to really prepare for baby to come home. A lot of our calls, our baby's already been born, right? And we like to present you, right? So you want to adopt, you have, your name kind of in the running, so to speak. And all of a sudden, literally, there's this baby coming into your care. And your lifestyle and your commitments have barely had time to adjust to this baby coming home. And then things start to catch up with you after baby's home. So we will do those check-ins. We will encourage people to speak with their doctors, check in with their practitioner, sign up with Interwoven connections. We also do peer-to-peer matching. So if we have another family that has been recently matched and they're in the local area, we will connect them. I do that personally many times and say, hey, we matched with another family. They're a couple months ahead of you in the journey. They live not too far. What do you think about connecting you with one another? So we do that quite a bit. And just we will offer an extra check-in if that family seems as though they might need another check-in, or we will connect with their practitioner and say, hey, when you're going out, just a heads up, this family might need a little bit of extra support. And that there was my long-winded answer.
I love that you touched on that, because post-adoption depression I think it's being talked about a lot more, but I really had no idea until we were in it that it was very prevalent, even potentially more prevalent than postpartum depression, because with postpartum depression, it's expected, right? As you said, moms are checked in on a regular basis by their doctors. It's hormones are flying and things like that. But when you have this instant parenthood, right? Again, I feel very grateful for having an amazing village of people and support. But yeah, if you don't have that, it can be very, very, very overwhelming. Absolutely.
I think the stats are 12% of adoptive parents experience post-adoption depression at some point.
And I know at Interwoven Connections, no matter when they come to us, they talk. We do ask about did you have those feelings in the beginning? And we talk about attachment and things like that. Just again, to really connect with people and let them know that they aren't alone in those feelings, that there are lots of people out there that have those feelings. So that's great that Beginnings does that.
You've all touched on support systems a little bit here and there, but I'd love to kind of dive into that and how extended family, friends, community members can support an adoptive family. And along with that, can you give us some things to avoid doing as someone a little bit more outside of the topic? I'd love to hear some no-nos as well.
Go ahead.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, I didn't want to be on the camera right away, but I will. I'll quickly just I think this is so important. And we often talk about like the adoption, like constellation, right? And I believe that extended family are a part of that. They are a natural part of many families' village. And they need to have an understanding of what this journey is that an adoptive family is going through. I believe Sophie Sturgenis offers a class from time to time for extended family members. I think it's incredible, and we encourage people to take that. I even believe Beginnings at some point has partnered with Sophie, so that she's offered that for friends and family to attend, and really just them understanding the adoption journey, understanding loss, attachment, etc. I think encouraging families to learn and read about adoption, but also explaining with family like the boundaries that an adoptive family might have to set in terms of the child story, the birth family story, why those boundaries need to be set. I know at Beginnings, when we send babies home, we even send like an adoption language brochure home with families and talk about, how we refer to adoption language, right? Real parent or natural parent, biological, adoptive parent, all kinds of language that is more accepted nowadays, and helping families to kind of come on board and learn, right? And we can't expect them also just to know. So I think that ongoing discussion with families, but coming from that place of wanting them to understand. I know I've worked with a few families where they're just really upset, right? That their mom just doesn't get it, right? She doesn't have the information to know what exactly she needs to get. So really using that lens of education and informing, I think is really helpful. If there's any piece of advice I could ever give to an adoptive family, is when you have your child's story in your hands and they are this little vulnerable person and they are entrusting you with themselves and with their story, that anything that you share with others about their story is something that they cannot get back and that you cannot get back. So it can be very tempting to share, right? Maybe sometimes out of nerves or I'm uncertain, this is a new situation, and share all about this child and their story. That means that everyone that you share that story with also can share that with anybody else. And so I just remind people that whatever you say, you can't bring that child's story back. So whether that's a conversation that you have as a couple, who are going to be the people that we really trust with the story? What are we willing to share? What aren't we willing to share? In protection for our child and their story and their privacy. And I actually learned that the hard way as an adoptive parent. And as my daughter, particularly, she grows and she learns about her story, I want her to be the one that knows more about her story than anybody else. Because it's hers. So if there's a no-no, I would say be really, really mindful about your child and their story and the privacy, as well as their birth parent story as well.
I think, sorry, just on that note, I think I would, get parents to prepare in advance, like for some of the questions that they may be asked about their child. Well, where did they come from, and who's the birth mother, and why was the child placed for adoption, and have your families prepare for those questions before, so that they do know how to answer those questions, and that it's okay to say, I'm not comfortable sharing that with you. It's my child's story, and when she's ready, she can share it, or he. If they don't think about it beforehand, sometimes they're pressured into, talking about that information when they don't want to. So it's important to have those. Think about all the questions that you may be answered, and then you can have prepared answers. And even for when the child goes to school, teachers may ask questions, friends, parents may ask questions, and kids can ask questions of kids like, why are you adopted, and what does that mean, and why aren't you with your real parents, and where are your real parents? And have your kids prepared for those questions as well, because that will be really, really helpful down the road.
Such good advice, because I find like when we're out, and I find it really hard not to just randomly tell people, oh, he's adopted, because we get a lot of the time, he looks just like you. Oh, he looks just like his daddy. And on the inside, I just sort of giggle and be like, he shouldn't. Right? And it takes a lot of pressure to not be like, tell people, well, he's adopted. Right? So even as simple as that and again, that was very early on. I felt like the need, I had to tell everybody when they said things like that. And of course now, like, I'm much more in control of it. But yeah, that's excellent advice. We do have 2 more questions and not a lot of time, but I really want to get through these last 2. I think they're really important to touch on. So the first one is, how has adoption and permanency work? How is it changing, especially with more openness, kinship placements, customary care placements? What sort of systemic changes would you like to see in the adoption process or post-adoption services? So I know that's like a really big question, but I want people to share so that, again, we open those gates, talking about openness and kinship and customary care and what that looks like.
I think I can say a little piece on that. I think an important part of that is knowing that openness is so different for every family. I know now most adoptions do have some sort of openness, but what that looks like is so different from family to family. So it can be with biological parents, it can be with siblings, it can be with aunts, uncles, grandparents, it could be letters, it can be pictures, it can be phone calls, it can be visits. It's so different from family to family, and what that looks like, and what it means to the children too. In my case, we have openness with my son's biological brother, and they have had visits literally since my son was born. So they visit each other every month, and that, to me, is a saving grace because he gets to know that piece of himself. And when he asks hard questions about his biological parents, which I don't often know the answers to, I was given advice as to start a binder for him. And when he asks those hard questions, we write it in there. And then I just say to him, one day if you want to reach out to your biological parents, you can ask them those questions. And I think that takes some weight off my shoulders and my husband's shoulders, because we don't want to tell him any false information that we don't know, but legitimately we don't know those answers, right? So hard questions do come, and we just put it in his binder, and he can add whatever he'd like in that binder, whether that be pictures of himself, drawings he's made, art crafts, whatever he wants. He knows it's in there. And he'll ask us questions, and they come at the most unexpected times in the car, or we're celebrating an event and all of a sudden he'll ask a question, and we just say, that's a good question. We can look through the history that we have on you, but at the end of the day, if we don't have an answer, we write it in the binder and leave that to him so he can ask those hard questions. And I found it worked wonderfully, because then I'm not telling him something that later on he can be like, well, you said this about this, Mom. And so I think it's important to know that those children really, it's such a valuable thing, openness, as hard as it can be. And it can be very, very difficult. Families are different. Situations are different. But for the child's sake, I think that openness piece with whomever that is very important for the child. And that's a part of them that they need to know. They need to know that piece. And for my son anyways, it has its up and downs, but when I see them together, it's like you would never think that they were not fully biological siblings, even though they're adopted with 2 different families. You see them together, you're like, wow, that is siblings through and through. So
very cool. Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
I can really quickly, just being mindful of time, I can't go into all of it, but 2 things. Watch Beginnings Family Services social media, because this month we are kind of going through how adoption has changed in the province of Ontario. So that's my quick way to talk about the changes, and I'll give you a really quick life example that maybe sums up kind of how things have changed. I was adopted in the early 80s, and I grew up knowing essentially nothing about my birth family, nor did my birth mother know anything about my adoptive family. family. I met her when I was almost 30, and I learned basically everything I know about her at that time. When my daughter was born, the morning after she was born, I sat in the hospital bed with her mom and with her, and we ate cheesecake and drank coffee together as we welcomed her into our families. And that was the start of how that relationship grew versus the experience that I had in the 80s. I was just chatting with my son's birth family today, making plans for our annual Christmas get together that they have at our house, where we will decorate snowmen, gingerbread men. And last time they were here was to carve pumpkins a couple weeks ago. So hopefully that sums up how perhaps things have changed in adoption.
Amazing. Yep, I feel that. Yeah, I won't get into it because we don't have enough time, and I wish we should have planned more time for this webinar because there's so much good information. And again, you all are a huge wealth of information, but we are at time. So I want to thank everybody really for being here. We will tag you all in the social medias. If anyone has any more questions, they can always reach out to us at Fertility Village Live. Any of these ladies here are always happy to chat, I believe, as well. Their organizations as well, wealth of information. So we'll make sure everyone gets the resource. So thank you again, all three of you, for joining us tonight and for those amazing insights. Again, I wish I had more time. I'm so passionate about this. If you have more questions, we'll link you up. Our next fertility support group is coming up this Monday. So if you haven't signed up, please do sign up. If you are maybe a prospective adoptive parent, please reach out. And yeah, we will see you next month. Did I miss anything, Kaylee?
Thank you so much.
No, you got it all. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.